The cold bites sharply through the thin woolen cloak. Smoke curls from the crooked chimney, carrying the scent of burning wood and damp earth. Inside the dim, cramped cottage, a small family huddles around a flickering hearth. Their faces are worn, eyes tired but watchful. Outside, the wind howls, rattling the shutters, and the bitter chill seeps through cracks in the rough wooden walls. No central heating, no hospitals, no pharmacies. Just this fragile shelter, a handful of herbs in a leather pouch, and a stubborn will to live. How did people survive in such a world? Without modern medicine to fight infections, without warm radiators to chase away the relentless cold, without clean water or even basic hygiene as we know it? Imagine waking every morning to the threat of disease lurking in the mud outside your door, to the harshness of winter nights that could freeze your breath before you even got under the threadbare blanket. No aspirin, no antibiotics, just the knowledge passed down through generations, whispered from wise women and village healers, and the hope that your body's own strength could fight the invisible enemies within. This is the Middle Ages, a time often dismissed as dark and hopeless. Yet millions lived, worked, loved, and grew old in this unforgiving world. So, what was their secret? How did they endure, adapt, and even thrive in conditions that would seem impossible today? To find the answer, we need to step back into their shoes, feel the biting cold on our skin, smell the smoke and earth mingled in the air, hear the creak of wooden beams and the distant tolling of a church bell. Join me on this journey through forgotten villages, simple homes, and the quiet resilience of a people who survived without the comforts we take for granted. Because the truth of their survival is stranger and stronger than any tale of magic or miracles. What did they know about life, about their bodies, about the world that we have forgotten? Let's find out. Step outside the cottage door and breathe in the sharp, damp air of a medieval village. The streets are muddy trenches, churned by hooves and feet. Waste from animals and humans mingles with the rain, flowing unchecked into the ditches. Clean water? A luxury few know. Wells are often shared, and rivers double as bath, laundry, and drinking source, inviting invisible threats lurking beneath their murky surface. There are no doctors as we know them. The nearest healer might be a village-wise woman, her knowledge a blend of herbs, old wives' tales, and prayers. Hospitals exist, but mostly as places for the destitute or dying, not the sick seeking cures. The idea of sterilization is unknown. Wounds are cauterized with heated irons, infected sores lanced with crude knives. Bloodletting, a common practice, often weakens rather than heals. And the cold, oh, the cold is relentless. Stone and wooden houses offer little protection against long winters. No glass in windows, only oiled parchment or wooden shutters. Central heating? A dream of the future. Instead, a small hearth fire serves as the heart of the home, its warmth fading quickly, forcing families to gather close or bundle in thick layers. Nights are spent in shared beds, breathing the same stale air while drafts creep in from every crack. Hygiene, as we understand it today, barely exists. Baths are infrequent, a chore reserved for special occasions or the wealthy. Clothing is often worn until threadbare, harboring lice and fleas. The lack of sanitation leads to outbreaks of diseases like typhus and dysentery. Yet people endure. Despite these hardships, medieval society is vibrant and alive. Markets buzz with traders shouting over the cacophony of animals and children. Churches ring bells calling the faithful to prayer, offering solace against the harshness of daily life. Festivals and rituals mark the passage of seasons, grounding people in a shared rhythm of work and celebration. Understanding this brutal context is crucial. It was a world where survival was a daily battle against unseen enemies, bacteria, cold, and malnutrition, where death could come swiftly from a minor injury or a contaminated meal. So how did they manage to live, work the fields, raise families, and even grow old in such unforgiving conditions? The answer lies not only in their harsh environment, but in how they lived their lives day by day, how they adapted, endured, and found strength where we might expect only despair. Next, let's step into the shoes of a typical medieval person and see what their everyday life really looked like. The first pale light of dawn creeps through the small window, barely piercing the thick wooden shutters. The village stirs. Inside a modest timber home, the farmer's wife wakes, her body already aching from yesterday's labor. She stokes the dying embers in the hearth, coaxing a fire to life with dried twigs and straw. The smoke curls upward, filling the room with a comforting warmth. Outside, the world is rough and raw. The farmer rises too, pulling on layers of coarse linen and wool, his clothes rough against skin, hardened by years of work. Before the sun climbs higher, he must tend to the animals, feeding chickens, milking cows, gathering eggs. These creatures are his lifeline, offering food, warmth, and sometimes barter. Breakfast is simple: dark, dense bread, a cup of thin ale or watered-down milk. No sugar, no spice, only what the land and seasons provide. Every morsel is precious. The day will be spent bent over fields, turning the stubborn earth with a wooden plow, sowing seeds, or harvesting whatever the weather has allowed. There are no machines, no fertilizers, only muscle, sweat, and knowledge passed down through generations. Hands blister, backs ache, but the work must go on. The village depends on this labor for survival. At midday, the family shares a brief meal, often taken outdoors or by the hearth if the weather is bitter. Children run barefoot through the muddy lanes, their laughter a rare burst of lightness amid the hard routine. They play with sticks and stones, learning the world through touch and trial. The afternoon brings chores, repairing thatched roofs, mending tools, collecting firewood. Women spin wool, weave cloth, bake bread. Life is a constant cycle of labor, punctuated by moments of rest, often brief and filled with quiet conversation or prayer. Hygiene is scarce. A quick rinse in a nearby stream or a wipe-down face with a damp cloth suffices. Bathing is rare and usually communal, scheduled around festivals or market days. As dusk falls, the village gathers around communal fires or in the local tavern. Stories and songs weave through the smoky air, reminding everyone that despite the harshness, life is lived fully. Sleep comes early. The cold night pushes all indoors. Under thick blankets and animal pelts, the family clings to warmth and to each other. This is no life of luxury. It's raw, tough, and unpredictable. Yet, it's life. And it is here, in this relentless rhythm of work and survival, that medieval people built the strength to endure. But even with such a day, illness and injury lurked close. Who did they turn to when the body failed? That's where medieval medicine steps in, a strange, mysterious world of herbal remedies, prayers, and old wisdom. When sickness struck, hope often rested not in grand hospitals, but in the humble hands of village healers, the wise women, the wandering herbalists, the local monks who tended the sick with care and ancient knowledge. These were the doctors of their time, without white coats or surgical tools, but armed with an intimate understanding of the land and its plants. Imagine a dimly lit hut, shelves lined with bundles of dried herbs hanging from wooden beams. The healer, a middle-aged woman with weathered hands and sharp eyes, crushes leaves and roots into poultices and teas. She listens closely to the symptoms whispered by a worried mother whose child has a fever that will not break. Her remedies are drawn from nature: chamomile for calming, willow bark for pain, garlic for infection. Sometimes the treatment includes a prayer or a charm, blurring the line between medicine and faith. Bloodletting, though risky, was a common practice, believed to balance the body's humors and purge illness. Monasteries preserved and copied medical texts, their monks carefully mixing concoctions in quiet chambers. Though crude by modern standards, these efforts laid foundations for later discoveries. Surgery was rare and dangerous, reserved for external injuries like wounds or broken bones, often done without anesthesia. The fear of disease was constant. Plagues and fevers swept through villages like storms, sudden and merciless. In such times, healing was as much about comfort and hope as it was about cure. The healer's touch, the ritual of care, brought reassurance even when science offered little. Yet, despite their limited tools, these practitioners saved countless lives. Their knowledge passed orally or in fragile manuscripts, entwining herbs, superstition, and early science. So, in a world without modern hospitals, healing was an art and a lifeline rooted in nature, community, and belief. But healing was only half the story. Their bodies had to be ready for battle against cold, infection, and starvation. How did their immune systems cope? What role did daily life and environment play in their resilience? Let's step closer to the invisible warriors inside their bodies, their immune systems. Beneath the rough hands and weathered faces of medieval villagers lay an invisible battlefield, a constant war waged inside their bodies. Without antibiotics or sterile environments, their greatest defense was their own immune system, honed and hardened by generations of exposure to the world's harsh realities. Imagine a child growing up barefoot, playing in dirt, sharing a bed with siblings and animals alike. To us, it sounds risky, even reckless. But for medieval people, this constant contact with microbes was a form of natural vaccination. Their bodies learned to recognize threats early, developing a complex ecosystem of bacteria and microorganisms, the microbiome, that worked as a silent guardian. Every cough, every scrape, every minor illness was a training ground. Survivors carried immune memory, passing resilience down through families and communities. The body adapted to the environment, becoming stronger and more efficient at fighting off infections that might overwhelm a modern, overly sanitized system. Their diets, though simple, were rich in natural foods, wild herbs, fermented vegetables, grains, and occasional fresh meat, all contributing to a robust gut flora, essential for immune health. Physical labor and exposure to fresh air, despite its dangers, kept lungs strong and blood flowing. Yet this adaptation came with a cost. Epidemics could still ravage entire villages, and life expectancy was lower than today. But the constant dance between humans and microbes shaped a population tough enough to endure centuries of hardship. In contrast, modern life often shields us too well, limiting our microbial encounters and sometimes weakening our natural defenses. Medieval people didn't just survive by chance. Their bodies were forged by fire, molded by nature's relentless trial. But their homes, their shelters, were equally vital in this survival story. Let's step inside the medieval house, a fortress against the cold and disease, to see how architecture and design protected these resilient bodies. Step inside a typical medieval dwelling and you'll find more than just four walls. The house was a fortress against the cold, wind, and dangers lurking beyond its wooden doors. Though lacking modern conveniences, these homes were ingeniously built to maximize warmth and safety. Picture a small one-room cottage with thick wattle and daub walls, woven branches plastered with clay and straw. These walls breathed, keeping the air fresh while blocking the harshest gusts. The roof, heavy with thatch, provided insulation, trapping heat inside. Windows were mere slits or covered with oiled parchment to keep drafts at bay, but allowed enough light for daily tasks. The floor was compacted earth, sometimes covered with rushes or straw, adding a layer of softness and insulation from the cold ground. At the heart of the home burned the hearth, a small open fire pit that served as stove, heater, and gathering point. Smoke drifted up through a hole in the roof or out a chimney if the home had one. The fire's warmth was precious and carefully tended, for it meant survival. Without radiators or insulation, people employed clever tricks to stay warm. Heavy wooden shutters closed tightly at night. Thick animal pelts and woven blankets layered beds. Families slept close together, sharing body heat to ward off the chill. The design of the home also kept disease at bay in subtle ways. By limiting drafts and controlling smoke, the hearth reduced dampness, a breeding ground for illness. The dirt floors, while not clean by today's standards, were regularly replaced or covered with fresh straw. Outside, buildings clustered closely, creating sheltered courtyards that broke the wind. Nearby barns and storerooms stored food and firewood, essentials for the long winter months. Though crude, these architectural solutions created microclimates that allowed people to endure freezing winters without modern heating. But protection was not only physical. Clothing was the next line of defense against the cold and harsh elements. Let's explore how medieval people dressed to survive biting winds and frost. In a world without central heating or modern fabrics, medieval clothing was more than fashion. It was armor against the cold. Every garment told a story of survival, crafted carefully from natural materials designed to trap heat and shield the wearer from biting winds and chilling dampness. Picture a village woman rising before dawn. She wraps herself in a coarse linen chemise, the base layer against her skin, rough but breathable. Over it, she dons woolen kirtles and cloaks, thick and heavy, woven from the fleece of sheep grazing on windswept hills. Wool's natural crimp traps warm air close to the body, creating a vital buffer against frost. Layers were key. Men wore tunics over shirts, with hose pulled tight over legs. Children, running barefoot in summer, were swaddled in multiple layers when cold weather came. Cloaks and mantles, fastened with brooches or pins, added another barrier, shielding from rain and wind. Footwear varied from simple leather shoes to sturdy boots lined with straw or wool. Hands were protected by gloves or mittens, often knitted or sewn from thick fabric. But warmth was not just about clothing's thickness, it was about clever layering and adapting to conditions. During the day, as the sun warmed the fields, heavy cloaks might be shed to avoid overheating, only to be pulled back on as dusk brought the chill. Colors and fabrics also played a role. Dark colors absorbed sunlight, offering slight warmth. Wealthier villagers might have access to finer wools or even fur, prized for their insulating properties. People also used animal pelts, hats lined with fur, and scarves woven from flax or wool. Hats, often overlooked today, were vital. Much heat escapes through the head, and medieval people knew to cover it well. Beyond warmth, clothing was a protective barrier against insects, dirt, and physical injury. But it came with sacrifices. Garments were heavy, often uncomfortable, and expensive to replace. Despite the hardships, this clothing system worked remarkably well, helping people endure freezing winters and damp, miserable conditions. Yet survival wasn't just about the body and shelter. It was also about mindset. The medieval psyche, shaped by rituals and community, gave strength to face hardships head-on. Next, we'll explore the psychology and habits that helped medieval people stay resilient in a harsh world. Survival in the medieval world was not just a physical battle. It was a test of the mind and spirit. Beyond layers of wool and stone walls stood a resilient psychology forged through centuries of hardship, faith, and shared tradition. Imagine a cold winter's evening in a village long before electric light. Families gather around the hearth, faces illuminated by firelight and shadowed by the flickering flames. Stories are told, tales of saints, miracles, and heroes who overcame impossible odds. These narratives provide more than entertainment. They are a source of hope and meaning amid uncertainty. Faith plays a central role. The Church's presence is woven into every aspect of daily life, offering comfort through prayer and ritual. The belief that suffering had purpose, that hardship was a test or a path to salvation, helped people endure pain and loss. When medicine failed, faith was often the last refuge. Rituals, from seasonal festivals to simple daily prayers, created a rhythm that grounded communities. The marking of planting, harvest, and feast days gave structure and a sense of control in a world often unpredictable and cruel. Communal gatherings also fostered resilience. Shared songs, dances, and celebrations strengthened bonds and lifted spirits. In hard times, neighbors supported each other, a psychological lifeline in the face of isolation. Medieval people developed habits of endurance, waking before dawn, accepting physical toil, and embracing a worldview that valued persistence over comfort. Stoicism was common. Suffering was met with quiet resolve rather than complaint. This mental toughness was a survival skill in itself. It shaped how people responded to illness, cold, hunger, and loss, not as insurmountable tragedies, but as challenges to face with courage and faith. Their inner world was as carefully cultivated as their fields and homes, a fortress of hope built to withstand life's relentless storms. Yet, no one survived alone. The collective strength of community was vital in this harsh environment. Next, let's explore how medieval people leaned on each other, the power of community and mutual aid. In the unforgiving landscape of the Middle Ages, survival was rarely a solo endeavor. Instead, it was a collective effort, woven tightly into the fabric of village life. The harsh realities of cold, hunger, and disease demanded cooperation, and the medieval community was a lifeline against isolation and despair. Picture a village square bustling with life, neighbors sharing news, exchanging goods, lending tools. A family struggling after a poor harvest receives help, extra grain, a few eggs, or labor in the fields from their neighbors. This wasn't charity in the modern sense. It was a mutual contract born of necessity and trust. Communal work was common. Tasks too large for one household, like harvesting fields or building fences, became village affairs. People sang and joked as they worked side by side, forging social bonds even in toil. Shared labor meant shared risk and shared reward. Feasts and festivals strengthened these ties further. Gatherings around fire and food created moments of joy and solidarity, reminding everyone that they were part of something greater. In times of crisis, plague, famine, or war, the community pulled together, pooling resources and knowledge to survive. The church played a crucial role in fostering social cohesion. It provided moral guidance, organized charity, and offered a place where people could unite in hope and prayer. This network of mutual aid extended to health as well. When someone fell ill, neighbors took turns caring for the sick, fetching water, or preparing herbal remedies. This care was essential in a world without professional health care. Even disputes and conflicts were often resolved through communal mediation, emphasizing harmony and the survival of the group over individual gain. In the face of relentless adversity, it was these social bonds, trust, cooperation, shared rituals, that built a safety net stronger than any stone wall or warm fire. But how does this medieval resilience compare to our modern lives? What have we gained and lost? Next, we'll dive into the contrast between then and now. Looking back at medieval life through the lens of our modern world, the differences are stark. No antibiotics, no central heating, limited hygiene. It's easy to assume that our ancestors were trapped in misery and suffering. But the truth is more nuanced. Yes, medieval people faced hardships we rarely imagine. Disease ran rampant, winters were brutal, and life expectancy was short. They lacked comforts we take for granted: electricity, running water, supermarkets. Yet they lived deeply connected to their environment, community, and rhythm of nature. Today, we enjoy unprecedented medical advances, climate-controlled homes, and abundant food. Our lives are longer, healthier, and often more comfortable. But in the process, we've also lost something vital: the resilience forged by daily struggle. The inner toughness of body and mind has softened. Modern sanitation and antibiotics protect us, but can leave us vulnerable to new challenges like autoimmune diseases and mental health issues. Our social fabric has shifted. While technology connects us globally, many people face isolation in their daily lives. The tight-knit communities that once ensured survival and emotional support have often been replaced by transient urban networks. Moreover, modern life's convenience sometimes disconnects us from the natural cycles that shaped human existence for millennia. We seldom experience the cold, the hunger, or the physical toil that sharpened medieval endurance. This contrast invites reflection. What can we learn from a world where survival required not just resources, but also community, adaptation, and mental fortitude? Medieval life was far from idyllic, but its challenges created strengths we might still admire and emulate. Still, behind the myths of darkness and misery lies a richer story, full of resilience and ingenuity. Next, we'll bring this to life through vivid stories from medieval chronicles, real people who lived and endured. To truly grasp medieval survival, let's step into the pages of history, where chronicles and diaries reveal the raw, personal stories of those who lived through the era's trials. In the early 14th century, during the harsh winter of 1315, the small village of Tynemouth faced famine after rains destroyed crops. One chronicle tells of a farmer named Edric, whose fields lay waterlogged and barren. With no harvest, his family faced starvation. But rather than despair, Edric rallied his neighbors. Together they rationed what little grain remained, shared firewood, and hunted small game in the nearby woods. This communal spirit kept them alive through the worst months. In another story, a young healer named Agnes traveled from village to village during the plague years of the mid-14th century. Despite fear and superstition, Agnes tended to the sick with herbal poultices and prayers, often risking her own life. Her chronicles speak of the countless faces she saw, children, elders, neighbors, lost to a disease no one could understand. Yet her care offered comfort and, in some cases, survival. A medieval monk's diary from a monastery near York describes the daily routine of tending to the sick in a rudimentary infirmary. The monk writes of a man with a severe wound, treated with poultices made from local herbs and prayers whispered in Latin. Though medicine was limited, the monk's devotion and the community's support gave the patient a chance. These stories reveal a world where survival was as much about human connection and courage as about tools and knowledge. They paint a picture of people who, despite overwhelming odds, forged resilience through cooperation, faith, and determination. But alongside these stories, many myths about the dark Middle Ages persist. It's time to unravel these misconceptions. The Middle Ages often get painted as a grim era of ignorance, filth, and cruelty, a dark time when progress stood still. But this picture is misleading, a tapestry woven from misunderstandings and exaggerations. First, the myth of universal filth and disease. While hygiene standards were not what we expect today, many medieval people practiced regular washing and cared for cleanliness within their means. Monasteries had surprisingly advanced sanitation systems, including latrines and running water from aqueducts. People bathed in rivers or heated baths when possible. Yes, plagues devastated populations, but these were tragic epidemics, not a permanent condition. Second, the idea that medieval medicine was purely superstition. In reality, medieval healers combined empirical knowledge with spiritual practices. Herbal remedies were carefully studied and passed down through generations. Universities and medical schools, like those in Salerno and Paris, thrived with scholarly activity, preserving and expanding ancient knowledge. Third, the belief that people lived in constant fear and misery is an oversimplification. Medieval communities celebrated festivals, music, and art. There was humor, creativity, and joy despite hardship. Life was hard, yes, but it was also rich with culture and meaning. Fourth, the assumption that progress ceased in this era ignores remarkable innovations. Advances in agriculture, architecture, and technology laid foundations for the Renaissance and modern Europe. Windmills, watermills, and crop rotation improved food production. Gothic cathedrals soared, blending engineering and artistry. Finally, the dark label reflects more about later perspectives than medieval reality. It's a myth born from Renaissance humanists who contrasted their time with what they saw as a backward past. By peeling back these layers, we see a more complex, vibrant picture, one of resilience, adaptation, and gradual progress. Still, after all this, what lessons can we draw from the medieval experience? How does their story resonate with us today? Let's close with a reflection on their strength and what it means for us now. As we close this journey through the Middle Ages, it's clear that surviving without modern medicine or heating was no small feat. Medieval people lived in a world full of challenges that tested their bodies, minds, and communities every day. Yet their story is not just one of hardship, it's a story of remarkable resilience, adaptation, and inner strength. They built lives shaped by nature's rhythms, forged bonds that kept them safe, and cultivated mental toughness to face the unknown. Their bodies adapted to microbes and harsh climates. Their homes, though simple, were thoughtfully designed to shelter and conserve warmth. Their clothing was practical armor against the cold, and their rituals and faith gave them hope and courage. Above all, their community stood as a bulwark against isolation and despair. What can we, living in a world of convenience and comfort, learn from this? Perhaps the greatest lesson is that resilience doesn't come from luxury, but from connection, to each other, to nature, and to a purpose greater than ourselves. In a time when modern life often isolates us, their example reminds us of the strength found in shared hardship and mutual aid. Their ability to endure pain and uncertainty with quiet courage challenges us to rethink how we face our own struggles. So, were medieval people just survivors? No, they were fighters, builders, caregivers, and believers. They were stronger in ways we often overlook. Next time you shiver in a cold room or face illness, remember the legacy of those who thrived without the comforts we depend on. Their story is not just history, it's a testament to human endurance. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, stay curious and stay resilient.